Since the Me Too movement took off in the fall of 2017 and forced us to think about how gender and power play out in the workplace, companies and the men who run them have mostly been held accountable for the first time for how they act. Recent fights about toxic masculinity, like the one over the Gillette commercial, keep us busy for weeks. Parents worry about how to raise boys to be men who treat women like people in the pages of New York Magazine, Time, and The New Yorker. And in the midst of all these helpful, if sometimes frustrating, efforts to fix a wrong that women have been suffering in silence for a long time, some men have, under the guise of taking #MeToo's lessons seriously, chosen not to do a personal reckoning at all. In a recent article from the New York Times, male managers who went to the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland said that instead of trying to change institutions in a big way, they were just minimizing contact between female employees and senior male executives in their companies to reduce the risk of sexual misconduct. The article, called Another Side of Me Too, Male Managers Are Afraid to Mentor Women, quotes an anonymous American finance executive who says he now thinks twice about spending one-on-one time with a young female colleague. He's not the only one who doesn't like being alone with a girl. According to a survey on the effects of Me Too done by Lean In and cited by the New York Times, almost half of male managers don't feel comfortable doing something common at work with a woman, like working alone or going out together. 1 in 6 male managers doesn't feel comfortable giving advice to a female coworker. A consultant who works with companies on issues of gender and diversity has had to tell men in management that it is against the law to avoid their female subordinates on purpose. This new plan to separate men and women has some troubling ideas behind it. The first is that these men seem to think that women are just making up stories about sexual harassment. You can't say you're not a harasser and stay away from women at the same time without suggesting that some women would lie about sexual harassment if they had the chance. If you don't want to be alone with your female coworkers, it shows that you either don't trust women in general or don't trust what they say about themselves. The other explanation is a self-serving cop-out. It says that men can't help but harass their coworkers when left alone with them, or that they can't tell the difference between normal behavior and predatory behavior. I'm going to give men the benefit of the doubt and assume that most of them are in the second, worse group. Even the top people seem to be working with this idea, when they should be asking why their employees don't have the critical thinking skills to tell the difference between sexual harassment and asking a coworker about their weekend. Men like the chief brand officer of Procter & Gamble are instead advocating in the pages of the Times for safe spaces where men can air their confusion and concerns about what behavior might qualify as bad. Because now we're talking about safe places. In fact, the CEO of the Female Quotient, a company that is literally dedicated to achieving workplace equality, goes one step further in the Times article and suggests turning the whole office into a safe space for men. I tell women, before you take offense, make men aware that you are uncomfortable, because it may not be intentional. Don't worry about the fact that if you can't tell when you're making a coworker uncomfortable, it shows a shocking lack of both empathy and observation skills. It seems like it's now up to women to play the game of, is this guy clueless or evil? This suggests that corporate America has taken all the wrong lessons from the Me Too movement. It is not another side of the Me Too movement that men would rather keep their distance from women at work than figure out why they can't tell the difference between predatory behavior and mentoring. It's just sexism in a new outfit. It's seeing women as things, like cupcakes in the break room when you're doing Whole30, or as harpies who lie about being harassed to get back at men. It's yet another time when women have to give up something, in this case mentoring opportunities that can make or break their careers, because men won't learn very basic social cues that women are taught from birth. And, as MSNBC anchor Stephanie Ruhle said at a Davos panel on the future of masculinity, it's really just an excuse to go back to all-male leadership boards and exclusive boys' clubs, according to the Times. It all started with rumors. Women told each other that men in their offices had all of a sudden stopped meeting with them or insisted on leaving the door open. A human resources consultant said that executives told her they wouldn't ride an elevator alone with a woman anymore. Suddenly, it got worse and worse, with men suddenly canceling business lunches or avoiding women they had once helped. In the same way that the MGTOW movement turns the structural oppression of women on its head by saying that men are the real victims of gender bias, this string of mainstream examples tried to make men look like the real victims of the Me Too movement. It was said that men had no choice but to protect themselves from an all-powerful group of angry, vengeful women who made false accusations, even if the only solution was to put them in a room by themselves. A Chicago orthopedic surgeon told the New York Times that he never spends time alone with female colleagues anymore. He said, "I'm very careful about it because my job is at stake. If someone at your hospital says you had inappropriate contact with this woman, you will be suspended for an investigation and that will be the end of your life." Does it ever go away? No one disagreed with his apparent implication that such accusations are made at random and for no reason. Even in the White House, people are avoiding women. Vice President Mike Pence started what is now called the Pence Rule, when he said he would never eat a meal alone with a woman who is not his wife. Once upon a time, reporting on such an idea could have been seen as inflammatory or biased, so it was important to present opposing arguments in a clear and strong way. But when it was linked to Pence, it became newsworthy enough for a lot of people to talk about. Sebastian Gorka, who used to be a deputy assistant to Donald Trump, tweeted, "Think. None of those poor women would have been abused if Weinstein had followed VP Pence's rules for meeting with people of the opposite sex." Of course, the same result could have been reached even if Weinstein hadn't been an abusive predator. Just an idea. Soon after, a book was written to spread the word. The Amazon page for Randall Bentwick's book The Pence Principle says, "Every man in America could learn a thing or two from our vice president. Be smart. Defend yourself, your career, your family, and your life from the false accusations of women now and in the future." This did not go unnoticed by the MGTOW, who celebrated with gloating Reddit threads, "Why feminists fear the Mike Pence rule," and YouTube videos, "We invented the Pence rule." It's also not just a small group of people who think this way. A study from last year found that 27% of American men now avoid one-on-one meetings with female co-workers. So, ideas that we might think of as weird and silly worries of people on the far edges of the internet are actually being waved in front of our faces from the White House lawn.